Hi, my name is Sorel, and I am addicted to oil, and so are you. Our whole world is. Because we're addicts, we've all noticed that dinosaur juice has become incredibly expensive recently. Right now, global gas prices are the highest ever in history. In the US, consumers are paying up to $5 per gallon. In Iceland and Norway, it's worse, upwards of $11 per gallon. But who is to blame? Well, Biden is blaming Putin. While everyone seems to be blaming Biden, we're being told a fuel crisis is driving up the cost for all of us. But if that's true, why is Venezuela paying only 10 cents per gallon? And who is really to blame for the rest of us getting financially drained at the pump? Long story short, it's complicated, but it's also actually very simple. Confused? Most people are. But one thing that's not up for debate is that a small group of people are making an exceptional amount of money due to high gas prices. And to understand this massive issue, we first have to understand what we actually pay for when we're paying for fuel at the pump. Around the world, the price of gas you pay is made up of a bunch of different charges. Things like government taxes, refining costs, sales and marketing, and of course, what the gas station earns for selling you the stuff. How this is broken up varies from country to country. In the United States, for example, tax on gas is around 20 cents a gallon, whereas in Australia, it's over $1.20 per gallon. But none of this really matters, as in the end, this all adds up to a small part of the cost of fuel you pay at the pump. In reality, most of the cost is simply due to the cost of oil that goes into making your gas, which in most countries on Earth is around 50 to 60% of the total price. So while there are a lot of theories out there saying that it's the petrol stations that are ripping us off or government taxes that are making fuel more expensive, well, this isn't exactly entirely true. In reality, it's the price of oil, as oil makes up most of the cost of the price of gasoline. Price of oil goes up, price of gas goes up. Price of oil goes down, and so does the price of gas. And so this is the simple part of what I was talking about earlier, but there seems to be something else going on, because in some places in the world, the price of oil, and therefore the price of gas, has almost doubled in just over a year. And so this is where we get to the complicated part. And there are 3 different parts to the complexity of why oil is so freaking expensive right now. The first part is inflation. When the economy is in the toilet, governments print a lot of money to keep the economy going. The more money that's printed, the more expensive things get, because the more dollars there are, the less each one is worth. This makes oil more expensive. Got it? So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because I've spoken about inflation a lot on this channel before. So now let's move on to the next main reason why oil is so expensive right now. And here is where things start to get really scummy. Earlier this year, Russia invaded Ukraine. And whenever there's a threat of a major war, nations want to stock up on oil. Because in the case a full-on global war kicks off, everyone wants to have large reserves and a backup plan in case they need more. This causes oil demands to skyrocket, which causes prices to rise. This isn't anything new. Every time there's been a threat of a war over the last 50 years, oil prices have skyrocketed because of increased demand. But since the invasion started, the West has hit Russia with some of the most severe sanctions in history, stopping Russia from trading with the world like normal. And this has meant a massive loss to Russia's economy. Now, here's the thing. Russia is part of a huge global oil producing gang, and this gang controls most of the world's supply of oil. OPEC stands for the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries. Its members include most of the heavyweights of the oil industry, countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Iraq, Iran, and Kuwait. Together, these nations control 80% of all of the world's oil reserves, which mean they have massive power to restrict and control the global supply of oil. And when you control the supply, you can control the price. In 2016, OPEC expanded to create OPEC Plus, which included a new member, Russia. And with that addition, OPEC Plus now controls 90% of all of the world's oil. Now imagine you're part of a gang and your gang controls most of what the world needs. And all of a sudden, the world starts being mean to one of the gang members. So what would you do? That's right. You'd make the world pay. Since the world started sanctioning Russia and oil demand has increased, OPEC has limited the supply of oil flowing to the rest of the world. And when there's a massive demand but not enough supply, prices go through the roof. Even though OPEC knows the world needs more oil, they're not willing to release the amount we actually need. And Russia is apparently happy with oil prices being so high, both because it puts more money in its OPEC gang members' pockets, but also because it punishes the West. So in short, this big oil gang is punishing you because your leaders wanted to punish Russia because Russia wanted to invade Ukraine. And at the same time, the gang is making a killing from ridiculously high oil prices. Did you know that there was a big oil gang that's controlling most of the world's oil supply? Let me know down below. But anyway, if you think that the situation sucks, there is one more piece of the puzzle as to why oil prices are actually this high. And as usual, it's because a small amount of very rich people want to use this situation to their benefit. And I'll talk about that in a second. But first, I just wanted to mention that there's still 1 week left of the 30% pre-sale of a brand new course, The Manual, where we teach you how to take your existing knowledge and skills and turn it into independent income. There's a link below to the pre-sale if you want to take advantage of that. With that out of the way, let's get back to the video. All right, so what is this last part of the puzzle piece as to why oil is so expensive? And you might have guessed it, it's got everything to do with greed. I'm sure I don't have to remind you that in early 2020, a global crisis shut down our whole planet. People were laid off work, borders were closed, and the entire world's economy ground to a halt. And what happens when people stop flying, traveling, and consuming? We use much less oil. After the world health crisis and the global shutdown, global oil usage dropped, and so did the demand to buy it. And this caused oil prices to drop massively. In fact, they went down so much that for a brief moment, oil prices went negative for the very first time in history, due to the oil producers lowering their prices considerably in an effort to try and sell their product. But long story short, oil prices plummeted, and this caused serious damage to the profits of the global oil industry. Now, if you're in the business of selling oil, but nobody wants to buy your oil, you significantly have to lower your costs in order to keep your business alive. And so this is what oil producing companies did in the global health crisis in 2020. To stop losing money, oil companies cut billions of dollars in costs to meet this new lower demand for oil. They fired tens of thousands of oil workers, shut down refineries, and stopped drilling for new wells. And it worked. It allowed them to remain in operation, but eventually our world started to recover. 2 years later, in 2022, flights are resuming, the economy is rising, and the world needs more oil again. And so you would expect that oil companies would increase their production in order to keep up with the massive new demand. Nope. The oil companies have basically said a big you to all of us. And instead of resuming normal oil production, they are more than happy to keep restricting our oil. With booming demand, but not enough supply, the price of oil skyrockets. And of course, higher oil prices are great for the oil business in general. But since oil companies drastically cut their operation costs 2 years ago, it means they're now spending much less money to sell each barrel of oil, which makes their profit margins even higher and puts more money in their pockets. In the first quarter of this year, the biggest oil producers on earth made close to $100 billion, which for some of them was 3 times more money than they had made the same time last year. They're making so much money, they have no incentive to hire more staff or to drill more wells in order to keep up with the new demand for oil. And they're not even trying to hide the fact. Shell has said the current situation is great for their shareholders and the company is performing better than it was before. Occidental's CEO has said that if they increased oil production, it would only hurt its shareholders. And when asked if Pioneer had any plans to increase their oil supply, this is what the CEO, Scott Sheffield, had to say.
It's all about the shareholders. They want a return of cash.
Long story short, it is the perfect storm for oil companies to be making more money than they ever have before. And to increase the oil supply would just basically mean it would hurt their profit margins. And so they sit back and they do nothing, which further restricts the oil supply, which means that the oil prices go through the roof. And that makes them even more profitable than they've ever been before. And the truth is, this whole oil situation is so complicated that it's hard to do it justice in a 10-minute video, but if I had to sum it up, it would be this. Inflation, war, and greed are the 3 main reasons why oil prices are so high right now. And as long as these 3 factors stay in play, you'll likely continue to pay ridiculously high prices at the pump. And despite the media pointing fingers at Biden and other politicians saying it's all their fault, that's not exactly true. But politicians do deserve at least part of the blame. Over the last decade, oil companies have spent billions lobbying governments to make rules and laws that benefit them. In the US alone, that number is almost $500 million so far. So even though our leaders could hypothetically force companies to increase production or sell the product at the fair price, they don't, because it's oil money that is helping fund their political campaigns to help them get re-elected. And they don't want the supply of dirty money drying up, which could happen if they create laws that hurt the profits of oil companies. So if you want to blame someone for the high gas prices, you can partially blame Biden or whoever is running a country. Unless, of course, you're in Venezuela, where the government sets the price, and so its people are only paying 2 cents per liter. You can also partially blame Putin for invading Ukraine, but mostly you can blame the oil industry for taking advantage of a bad situation so that they can make more money than before. As the saying goes, never let a good crisis go to waste. Please consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this in your feed, and also share it around if you got value from it. Also, we have a newsletter of 65,000 people getting extra golden financial nuggets written up in beautiful stories. Link in bio, and that's it. I'll see you in the next one.